Ryan's office revenge. Steve Rodriguez's face went dead white when he saw the sealed envelope on my desk. I'm talking ghost pale, like he'd just seen his own obituary. Steve's been here 14 years, keeps his head down, never causes trouble. When a guy like that doubles back to your cubicle and whispers, "Don't sign it," check who's on the CC list while his hands shake. You pay attention. My name's Mark Patterson. I'm 45, and I've been working risk assessment at Blackstone Defense Systems for 17 years. Before that, 8 years military service, Army intelligence, if you want specifics. I've seen enough games to know when someone's setting a trap. It was compliance day at Blackstone, annual ritual where everyone gets their packet of legal language to sign. Usually takes 5 minutes. You check acknowledged without reading a word, then get back to real work. Defense contractors love their paperwork almost as much as they love government money. Except this year felt different. The energy was off. I opened my envelope, expecting the usual 3 pages about data handling and conflict of interest. Instead, I got 4 pages of dense legal language that looked like it came straight from a criminal defense lawyer's playbook. At the bottom, under my signature line, were 2 CC entries that made my blood pressure spike. Diana Foster from Legal Compliance, that's normal. But also Alan Bishop, forensic investigator. Let me tell you something about forensic investigators at defense contractors. They don't show up for routine paperwork. They show up when someone's been skimming from Pentagon contracts and the FBI is asking questions. Seeing his name on my compliance packet was like finding a SWAT team business card in your mailbox. For the past 6 months, I'd been flagging irregularities in our Aegis missile guidance system contracts. Nothing dramatic, just invoices that didn't match delivery schedules, service dates that overlapped in impossible ways, authorization codes that looked forged every time I brought it up. In our Tuesday security reviews, Howard Walsh, our contracts director, would wave it off. "Defense procurement is messy," he'd say. "Pentagon changes specs midstream. You know how it works." Then 10 weeks ago, Howard suddenly retired. Personal reasons, they announced. No retirement party, no farewell speech, no forwarding address. Just gone. His replacement was some finance specialist named Patricia Nelson, who avoided eye contact and spoke in whispers. Now here I was, staring at legal language that basically said I acknowledge participation in historical oversight processes for classified defense contracts. Translation: whatever happened before with those missile contracts, you're on the hook for it. I walked to the break room, trying to look normal while my mind shifted into tactical mode. Military intelligence teaches you to gather information before making moves. People were chatting about weekend plans, drinking burnt coffee from machines that hadn't been serviced since the Clinton administration. The new intern was already halfway through signing his packet like he was ordering lunch. Back at my desk, I noticed something that made my jaw clench. My packet was stamped version 4B in small print at the bottom. I'd been doing compliance long enough to know that was unusual. Standard documents don't get version numbers like software updates. So I did what any suspicious intelligence veteran would do. I started reconnaissance. Casual conversations, innocent questions, building a picture. I asked Rachel Williams in quality assurance if I could compare formatting with her packet. "Just want to make sure mine printed correctly," I said with a smile. Hers was 3 pages. Standard language about data security and export controls. No extra CCs. No forensic investigator. That confirmed what my gut already knew. My document wasn't routine paperwork. It was a snare with my name engraved on it. Steve doesn't normally talk face-to-face. He emails from 20 feet away, uses Slack for conversations that should take 30 seconds. Military guys recognize other military guys, and Steve had that Navy precision about him. When he leaned in that morning with eyes darting like he was checking for snipers, I knew he was taking a career-ending risk. After he walked off, I started deeper reconnaissance. I pulled up the Aegis contract files I'd flagged 2 months earlier. The pattern was clearer now with distance. 4 subcontractors, all reclassified after Howard's departure, all tied to Q3 Pentagon payments. Someone had gone back and sanitized the approval chains, but they'd done it sloppy. Authorization timestamps were out of sequence. Digital signatures had metadata gaps. The worst part? My risk assessment tag was listed as the original oversight authority on these contract modifications, except I never signed off on final approvals. I'd been removed from the authorization chain halfway through the review process, replaced by Patricia Nelson, Howard's quiet replacement. Checked the document properties on my compliance packet. Created 4 days ago. Modified the evening before distribution. Standard compliance documents are finalized weeks in advance, not edited at midnight like term papers. I compared my version 4B to the template stored on our shared compliance drive. That one was created 3 weeks ago. Clean language about general security protocols. No Diana Foster. No Alan Bishop. No historical oversight processes that could land me in federal prison. Someone had spent serious time crafting my personal trap. Custom-built legal language designed to make me liable for defense contract fraud I never authorized. I sat back in my chair, watching office life continue around me. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the industrial printer churning out reports. Normal Tuesday energy, except I was sitting in the middle of what felt like an active minefield. I couldn't sign it. That much was obvious. But I also couldn't refuse outright. In the defense world, non-compliance with security protocols raises red flags that bring unwanted attention. If I balked at signing, they'd know I was onto them. Military intelligence taught me patience. Gather intel, assess the battlefield, then strike. So I made a tactical decision. I'd delay signing while building a complete picture of what they were trying to pin on me. The third cup of coffee didn't help my nerves, but it gave me an excuse to move around the office. I pulled up the archived Aegis contract files I'd bookmarked 3 months ago. Call it paranoia from my Army days, but I always keep copies of anything that smells wrong. The subcontractor in question was Meridian Technical Solutions. Except now they were showing up in our Pentagon billing system under 3 different corporate names, all funneled through shell companies that hadn't existed 6 months ago, all linked back to approval chains that used my risk assessment code as primary authorization. Here's what made my blood run cold. I'd been systematically removed from those email chains the same day we had a company-wide security briefing. Mandatory attendance, phones confiscated, everyone locked in conference room A for 4 hours, while they updated our clearance protocols. Perfect cover to make contract modifications, while the risk assessment guy was unreachable. I opened the original email thread and found the exact moment I vanished from the approval chain. 3:47 p.m. Same day. Howard Walsh logged his final status update before retiring for personal reasons. They'd waited for me to be offline, then executed their plan. But they'd made one mistake. Military habits die hard, and I'd been automatically forwarding copies of all classified contract reviews to my personal secure server since day 1. Nothing illegal, just backup copies in case our main system got hacked, which happens more often than the Pentagon admits. I accessed those files now. The timeline was crystal clear. Original Aegis contracts had legitimate authorization chains. Then, during the security briefing, new approval documents appeared with my risk assessment stamp on modifications I'd never seen. Someone had digital copies of my authorization signature and was using them to legitimize contract changes worth $12 million in Pentagon funding. I sat back, processing the implications. This wasn't just corporate fraud. This was defense contract manipulation, which meant federal prosecution territory, FBI territory, the kind of charges that put people in prison for decades. And they wanted me to sign a document acknowledging historical oversight of the very contracts they'd fraudulently modified. Military training kicked in. I copied everything to an encrypted drive, uploaded backups to 3 separate secure cloud accounts, then printed hard copies. 47 pages of evidence that someone was running a defense contract scam using my credentials as cover. I needed to test something. Around lunchtime, I made casual rounds with my clipboard, pretending to verify compliance packet formatting consistency, standard procedure for quality control. Nancy Williams in engineering had signed the normal 3-page version. So had Paul Martinez in procurement. Kevin Foster in IT support got the standard packet. Even the executives had received version 3. I was the only person in a 200-employee defense contractor who got version 4B. The version with federal liability language and forensic investigator oversight. Time to probe the enemy's defenses. I stopped by legal compliance to test their reactions. Found Linda Thompson, Diana Foster's assistant, typing under those motivational posters about excellence through accountability that make corporate life feel like prison with better coffee. "Quick question," I said, keeping my tone professional but concerned. "My compliance packet looks different from others I've seen. Extra pages, specialized language about defense contracts. Is this normal for risk assessment personnel?" Her smile flickered, like a bad fluorescent bulb. "Oh, probably just updated language for security clearance positions. We revised templates for certain roles. Is it standard to CC both legal compliance and a forensic investigator?" She blinked too slowly, the way people do when they're calculating lies. Some positions require additional oversight, especially with classified contracts. Nothing unusual. Great. Can I get written confirmation of that policy change? Well, we don't typically provide written confirmations for routine procedural updates, but if you have specific concerns, you could submit a formal inquiry through proper channels. Perfect corporate deflection. But her body language told me everything. Defensive posture, avoided eye contact, voice pitched slightly higher. She knew this wasn't routine. Instead of pushing further, I smiled and backed away. "Thanks for clarifying. Just wanted to make sure I understood the requirements." But instead of returning to my desk, I kept walking down the corridor, past the classified document storage room, out the side exit to the parking garage. Military paranoia had taught me to prepare for situations like this. I unlocked my truck, opened the tool compartment, and retrieved a waterproof case I'd installed 2 years ago after a security breach at another defense contractor. Inside was a backup communication system, encrypted satellite phone, portable hard drives, contact information for Pentagon Inspector General's office. I uploaded copies of all evidence to the case drives, sealed them back in the compartment, then returned to the building through the main entrance like I'd just stepped out for air. That evening, I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I parked across the street from Blackstone Defense, laptop open, watching office lights dim floor by floor as people headed home. Time to test their internal security system. 5 years ago, I'd helped design Blackstone's whistleblower protocol as part of our Pentagon compliance requirements. It was supposed to be bulletproof, anonymous reporting, external oversight, Inspector General notification. But I suspected they'd compromised it. I drafted a careful report. Nothing accusatory, just professional concerns about potential irregularities in Aegis contract approval processes and possible unauthorized use of digital authorization signatures. Clinical language that would raise appropriate flags without pointing directly at specific individuals. Before submitting, I routed the report through an encrypted proxy server and blind copied my personal secure email to monitor who accessed it. At 8:43 p.m., I submitted the anonymous whistleblower report through official channels. By 8:51 p.m., my phone buzzed with an encrypted notification. The report had been read by Diana Foster in legal compliance. At 8:54 p.m., it was forwarded to Alan Bishop, the forensic investigator. No Inspector General notification, no external oversight, no ethics committee review. They'd gutted the whistleblower system and turned it into a surveillance tool. Instead of protecting people like me, it identified them. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, watching the last security guard make his rounds through the building windows. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. A coordinated operation involving legal, a forensic specialist, and probably executive leadership. They'd compromised the safety systems, falsified contract authorizations, and built a perfect legal trap with my name on it. But they'd made one critical mistake. They were playing games with someone who'd spent 8 years in military intelligence, where paranoia keeps you alive and documentation wins wars. Time to show them what real operational security looked like. Next morning, I walked into Blackstone Defense like any other day. Except now, I was hunting instead of being hunted. First sign of escalation came at 8:23 a.m. when I tried accessing the classified contract database. My security credentials, valid for 4 years, suddenly returned an error message. Access suspended pending administrative review. I called Kevin Foster in IT security. Morning, Kevin. Having trouble with my clearance access. System says I'm suspended? Oh, hey, Mark. Yeah, we're implementing new security protocols today. Some high clearance accounts are temporarily locked while we upgrade encryption standards. All accounts or just specific ones? Just risk assessment and contract oversight positions. Pentagon directive came down yesterday. Should be resolved in 48 to 72 hours. Pentagon directive. Sure. More likely Diana Foster directive, implemented while I was sitting in my truck documenting their crimes. Second warning came as overheard conversation from 2 analysts at the coffee station. I was refilling my mug when I caught fragments of their discussion. The guy with the Aegis contract issues, right? Yeah. But retroactive acknowledgement protects the company if he voluntarily signs. If he doesn't, legal says, it gets complicated. Voluntarily signs. There it was. They needed my signature on that compliance document to complete their liability shield. Without it, their defense contract fraud scheme had a Mark Patterson-sized hole that federal investigators could drive through. By 9:45 a.m., I decided to stop playing defense. I started clearing personal items from my desk, photos, military commendations, anything with sentimental value. Not because I was planning to leave, but because I wanted my workspace to look untouched when this situation exploded. At 10:17 a.m., Steve appeared at my cubicle and dropped an unmarked envelope on my keyboard. No eye contact, no words, just kept walking like we were strangers passing in an airport terminal. Inside the envelope, a single sheet with 4 words written in block letters. Conference Room D, noon. Conference Room D was in the basement, originally designed for classified briefings. No windows, no recording devices, no electronic surveillance. Perfect for conversations that needed to disappear. I didn't go immediately. Military discipline teaches you to control timing, not let the enemy set your schedule. I waited until 11:58, then headed downstairs. Conference Room D smelled like old documents and forgotten secrets. Steve was sitting at the metal table, hands folded, looking like a man about to violate his security clearance for moral reasons. He slid a thick folder across the table without preamble. Inside was a complete operational timeline, 14 months of contract modifications, risk assessments, and approval chains, all annotated in red ink with handwritten notes. One entry made my pulse spike. Aegis approval chain modified. MP authorization bypassed Nov 15. Next to it, Steve's handwriting. Digital signature applied without MP knowledge or consent. I flipped pages. More annotations. MP removed from oversight chain, Deck 3. And below it, executive authorization. Foster-Nelson collaboration confirmed. Steve finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. They needed a patsy. Who exactly? Diana Foster? Patricia Nelson? Probably someone at executive level. Had to pin the contract irregularities on someone with appropriate clearance level. And they chose me because? Steve leaned back, looking exhausted. Because you're thorough. You document everything. You follow protocol. That makes you simultaneously valuable and dangerous. He was right. My attention to detail was exactly why they could frame me, and exactly why I could prove my innocence. The compliance document they want me to sign? Custom designed by Alan Bishop. He's not just a forensic investigator, he specializes in legal liability mitigation for defense contractors. That document would make you legally responsible for contract approvals you never made. I studied the timeline. My name appeared 23 times as oversight authority on Aegis contract modifications, all between dates when I'd been systematically excluded from the actual approval process. Executive leadership knows about this? Steve nodded grimly. Deputy Director Charles Morrison was briefed last week. Didn't want Pentagon Inspector General involvement. Called it internal administrative irregularities that should be handled quietly. Translation: he prioritized company reputation over federal compliance. Steve slid another document across the table. The original Pentagon Whistleblower Protection Protocol I'd helped draft 5 years ago during our defense compliance overhaul. They gutted this too, he said. Routed all anonymous reports directly to legal compliance instead of external oversight. I stared at my own signature on a document designed to protect people exactly like me. Now it was useless, compromised, turned into a weapon against the people it should defend. Steve stood up. You've got until end of business today. After that, they initiate formal proceedings. Non-compliance with security protocols becomes a clearance violation. What kind of proceedings? Administrative review. Suspension pending investigation. Eventually, they'll say you were uncooperative with routine compliance requirements. All documented, all legal, all devastating to your career. I closed the folder. The weight of 17 years at Blackstone suddenly felt heavier than my military pack had ever been. Why help me? Steve looked at the door, then back at me. Because I was in the meeting when they selected you. Saw how quickly they agreed on your name. Like they'd already run the numbers and decided you were expendable. He paused. You're the only guy in this building who still thinks integrity matters. Steve headed for the door, then stopped. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. And make sure your evidence trail is bigger and more documented than theirs. After he left, I sat alone in that soundproof room, folder in front of me, mind shifting into full operational mode. This wasn't about corporate politics anymore. This was about federal crime, professional destruction, and probably criminal charges if their plan succeeded. But they'd made a critical tactical error. They were trying to outmaneuver someone who'd spent 8 years in Army intelligence, where documentation saves lives and thorough preparation wins wars. I opened my encrypted phone and started making calls. First to my contact at Pentagon Inspector General's office, then to the FBI's Defense Contractor Fraud Division. Time to show them what a real counterintelligence operation looked like. Back at my desk, the original compliance envelope sat there like a loaded weapon with a bow tied around it. I didn't touch it. Instead, I placed my own envelope, white, unmarked, sealed with military precision, directly on top. At 2:34 p.m., they came for me. 2 lawyers from Diana Foster's office, young and polished, wearing those helpful expressions that barely disguise corporate threats. Behind them walked Alan Bishop himself, the forensic investigator whose name had started this whole mess. "Mark," the taller lawyer said, positioning himself to block my view of the hallway, "we noticed you haven't submitted your security compliance acknowledgement." I smiled calmly. "You're absolutely right, I haven't. Is there anything we can clarify? Defense contract language can be complex, especially with classified oversight requirements." "Actually," I said, picking up my envelope, "I'm glad you're here. I have something for you to review first." Their eyes went to my envelope like it might contain anthrax. I stood slowly, walked around my desk, and handed it to the shorter lawyer. They hesitated, confused. "This wasn't in their script. This isn't the compliance document you sent me," I explained. "It's significantly more comprehensive. Inside was everything. Complete Aegis contract timeline with authorization discrepancies highlighted. Screenshots of my digital signature being used on approvals I never made. Email chains showing my systematic removal from oversight processes. Pentagon Inspector General. Contact information with case reference numbers already assigned. FBI Defense Contractor Fraud Division. Preliminary report confirmation." The forensic investigator, Alan Bishop, stepped forward. "Mark, if there are concerns about procedural irregularities, we're happy to address them through proper administrative channels." "No need," I said calmly. "I've already addressed them through proper federal channels." Dead silence, the kind that feels like vacuum pressure before an explosion. As of this morning, Pentagon Inspector General has initiated formal review of Blackstone Defense's Aegis contract modifications. FBI Defense Contractor Fraud Division has opened preliminary investigation into unauthorized use of digital authorization signatures. I picked up their trap document, the one designed to make me liable for their crimes, and held it up. This compliance document contains language that would make me legally responsible for contract approvals I never authorized. Fortunately, I kept detailed records of my actual involvement versus the falsified approval chains. The taller lawyer cleared his throat. "Mark, if there's been a misunderstanding about administrative procedures, no misunderstanding. Federal investigators are very clear about the distinction between administrative errors and intentional fraud." I tapped my envelope in his hand. "That package includes complete documentation of unauthorized signature use, timeline analysis of my exclusion from legitimate approval processes, and recorded evidence that your internal whistleblower system was compromised to identify rather than protect reporting personnel." Silence. Beautiful, heavy, career-ending silence. The Pentagon takes defense contract fraud seriously, especially when it involves $12 million in missile guidance system funding. Alan Bishop's face had gone gray. "Mark, federal involvement might be premature. Internal administrative review could resolve these irregularities more efficiently." "Internal review?" I leaned back slightly. "You mean the same internal system that created fraudulent approval chains using my credentials without authorization?" I straightened my badge. "Pentagon Inspector General doesn't consider defense contract manipulation an internal matter. Neither does FBI. They didn't ask more questions, just nodded quietly and left, my envelope clutched in hands that weren't quite steady. By 4:18 p.m., the entire legal compliance department had vanished. Offices empty, auto replies activated, like someone had triggered an evacuation alarm only they could hear. At 4:42 p.m., I got a call from Deputy Director Charles Morrison's office, not his assistant, him personally. "Mark, I understand there may be some confusion about compliance documentation. Could you come by my office?" Conference Room 9A was Blackstone's executive suite. Real mahogany, government contract awards on the walls, photos of Morrison shaking hands with Pentagon officials who probably weren't going to be happy about his current situation. Morrison stood when I entered. No assistants, no lawyers, no pretense. Mark, I've been briefed on your concerns regarding Aegis contract procedures. I took the offered seat and waited. We've initiated immediate internal review of all contract modification processes. Effective immediately, all Aegis-related documentation has been secured pending comprehensive audit. Still nothing from me. We'd like to offer you expanded oversight authority, director-level position, direct reporting to Pentagon Compliance Office. Your military background and attention to detail would be valuable assets. I looked at him across that polished table. You're offering me a promotion after trying to frame me for federal crimes? His composure cracked slightly. There was never any intention to implicate you inappropriately. If documentation errors created that impression, we'll correct them immediately. Documentation errors? I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my Pentagon Inspector General, contact. Should I call Agent Martinez and explain that $12 million in contract modifications using forged authorizations were just documentation errors? Morrison's face went pale. That won't be necessary. We'll handle this through proper administrative channels. It's already being handled through proper federal channels. I stood up. Director of Internal Security. Full autonomy. Direct Pentagon reporting authority. Redesigned compliance protocols with federal oversight integration. He was already nodding. Whatever you need. And I want complete access to all personnel files related to this investigation, including executive communications with legal and Alan Bishop. Done. By 5:30 p.m., the internal memo went out. Organizational restructuring of security oversight functions and enhanced federal compliance integration. Corporate language for we got caught, and Mark Patterson is now running the show. At 6:15 p.m., I walked past Diana Foster's office. Empty desk, nameplate gone. Patricia, Nelson's office had a box of personal items by the door and a security escort waiting in the hallway. I didn't pause or gloat, just kept walking. 3 weeks later, FBI arrested Alan Bishop for defense contract fraud conspiracy. Diana Foster negotiated a plea agreement. Patricia Nelson turned state's evidence in exchange for reduced charges. I kept my promotion and redesigned Blackstone's entire compliance system with real federal oversight. No more rubber stamps, no more internal cover-ups, no more treating experienced employees like expendable problems. They thought they could outmaneuver a guy with 17 years of defense industry experience and 8 years of military intelligence training. They assumed age meant weakness, that loyalty meant blindness, that compliance meant submission. Some lessons you learned the hard way. Never underestimate the soldier who built the foxhole you're trying to bury him in. When bureaucrats play war games against warriors, the outcome is never in doubt.